Hello, my name is Gabriel Gaynor, and with my term project, I decided to answer the question of what happened to Mercedes. Formula One is a racing sport in which 10 teams compete and 20 drivers compete, for two for each team, in a series of race circuits where points are scored throughout the season. The driver with the most points at the end of the season wins the Drivers' Championship, and the team with the most cumulative points wins the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes has won eight constructors championships in a row, and their top driver Lewis Hamilton has won seven of the last eight drivers championships. Um, to do this analysis on what's happened to them, we need to take a look at their closest competitors, and by doing that, we should be able to identify what the problem with their current car is, because they have gotten off to such a slow start that it's interesting after 8 seasons of dominating the sport that they have fallen so far behind. So maybe we can answer what's going on there. First, I had to pick what teams to analyze, and in Formula One, you want to make sure to do your analysis on the two closest competitors to you, because there is such a dramatic difference in the top of the field versus the back of the field and even the midfield, because so much goes into these cars, so much is invested in these cars, so much engineering is going on in these cars that you can only compare yourself to your closest rivals. So then I decided to try and select the best driver from each team. I thought that would give a best analysis of the car without getting overly complicated. Doing this analysis on 6 drivers could get a little out of the scope of this project. And then I needed to identify data that could get me the best comparison, and I think that the telemetry data is the best for that. It has a few different variables, such as the delta time, which is the change in a driver's time versus the best time on the track. And it also compares speed, throttle, braking, and DRS, which is drag reduction system. I might talk about a little bit more later if I have the time. The circuit speed comparison I thought would be really helpful, because personally I really like maps, and I think seeing this data mapped out on a circuit really does a lot for the telemetry data that might be a little difficult to digest from a non-racing fan. I found the Fast F1 data set. It also comes with a Python package that includes a few built-in functions that are very helpful for analyzing this kind of data. When I went about trying to decide how to do this, I picked a few races, and I'll get into more about that decision later, but I decided I'd focus on the qualifying sessions, because in qualifying, these drivers are truly trying to get the best out of their car, and they're not racing against one another where lots of different variables can happen. Wrecks, getting pushed off the track, or conditions change on a daily or on a regular basis while they're out there on the race. So I thought focusing on the qualifying session would be best. And more than that, I decided to pick the fastest qualifying lap for each driver. I think that shows the driver getting peak performance out of their vehicle. So that is what we're trying to find out, is what's going on with their car. So I think that is truly the best place to start. So after making those decisions, I was able to identify that in the data and get my drivers all sorted out with their fastest laps. And then I needed to start setting up my plots. So I did a delta time comparison from both of the delta times are comparing Hamilton to the other two drivers. So when you see this chart, the baseline is really representing both his two biggest competitors, Max Verstappen driving for Red Bull and Charles Leclerc driving for Ferrari. So the two other lines you'll see on the chart will be Hamilton's time. So then I set up my overall plot, which included 5 different plots to look at this telemetry data. I used distance on the y-axis because it shows the track in meters as across the y, and or across the x-axis, and then I could use the different variables to plot the y's of speed, throttle, braking, and DRS. Speed and DRS kind of show, well, speed shows quite a bit, but DRS shows you a bit about the straight speed. DRS is an enhancement that you're allowed to use if you are within a certain distance of another driver. I think it's 1 second. You can open up basically a flap on your spoiler that reduces drag and makes the car go a lot faster. So that was important, but then braking and throttling I think shows very well how a car performs in the turns, and that's what a lot of the investment goes into these cars, is how fast they can drive when they're making these sorts of maneuvers. No other race car really has races like they do with this kind of turning. So that's a big aspect of the car, and obviously speed is overall what we want to see. It's what's going to help Mercedes win races. So then I had to set up my circuit map that went with it. This is actually where I struggled the most in this project, trying to map this out. I was having quite a bit of difficulty comparing the speeds and then getting the speed to actually map out on the circuit, until I finally realized I don't actually need to map the speed. I need to map the XY coordinates where Hamilton is faster than his competition. So by doing that, I could then, once I figured that out, I could then take the index value of each point of the data and compare each speed from Hamilton to his opponent, and in some cases that's Charles Leclerc, in some cases that's Max Verstappen, and plot out the XY and do so by team color. So if Hamilton's faster, we'll plot his team color. If Leclerc's faster, we'll plot red for Mercedes. I chose the Barcelona Grand Prix as the first circuit to analyze. I thought it truly showed straight speed very well, as you'll see in this next chart here. It's got a very long straight, and a couple straights, but a very long straight. And you can see in the delta time at the top, Lewis does quite well at the beginning where that straight is, and then he kind of tapers off until being about 0.75 seconds behind at the end, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in Formula One, a hundredth of a second is quite a big deal, especially at the top tier, what we're looking at here. If you're looking at the bottom tier, like Williams or Aston Martin or something, maybe it wouldn't be as big of a deal, but at the top tier, it's quite a big deal. So then you can see in speed, it actually looks not so bad for him, and I guess that's what you'd expect, but the negative 0.75 seconds. But if you look at throttle and braking, you do kind of see a little bit late on throttle, a little late on braking. DRS is kind of hard, maybe a little bit behind, but nothing crazy. But looking at the circuit map, I think is interesting. You see performing quite well on the straight, and he seems to lose a majority of the corners. But this circuit I didn't truly choose for corners, so maybe we can find that out better in another circuit. Alright, so we'll go to Silverstone here. This is in England. This is Lewis Hamilton's home track and Mercedes' home track, as they're a English team. Alright, so here we see, I picked this because I felt like it had a lot of different curves and turns. I felt like it truly showed off the handles pretty well on this vehicle. And you'll see the delta time actually, again, not too bad. He falls back about half a second, a little bit faster than the last circuit for a while. On Verstappen, and I don't know, maybe half of that on Leclerc. Leclerc's in the orange, or his speed against Leclerc's in orange. He even overtakes him for a minute and then loses it there at the end. So very close, and you can see that very well in the speed chart. Just kind of barely falling behind around 1,500 meters, and then again at the end. Past like 5,500 meters and through the end. I didn't really see anything too identifying in the throttle and braking. I guess a little late on the braking. A couple of times this throttle didn't seem quite up to par with the other teams, but nothing crazy. And then for some reason DRS wasn't plotted here, and that's okay because this was my turn map anyway. So you'll see the big section of black there. That was certainly something that I could work on further to try and enhance this project. It did seem like a couple of my XYs weren't properly comparing. I just kind of ran out of time, and I would love to fix that and figure out what's going on there. So next slide shows the Spielberg Grand Prix, as it's said in the data, but this is known as the Austrian Grand Prix. It is Red Bull's home circuit. You see a big supporting there for their lead driver, Max Verstappen from, he's Dutch, so that's where all the orange is coming from there. So this one I felt was a good mix. I think it shows some nice long straights, some very curvy turns, so I was hoping to learn quite a bit on this one, especially after looking at the previous two. And you see Hamilton performs actually quite well, almost even putting himself on pole until he gets halfway through the circuit at 2,000 meters. He starts to drop off and drop off quickly. And to both teams, you see the orange for Ferrari and the blue for Red Bull dropping quickly from 2,000 meters to 4,000 meters. In the end, he's 7.5 seconds behind, which is just staggering for Mercedes. That's quite behind. So let's take a look at why. His speed, you can see in the following chart, matches his delta time perfectly. He starts falling behind on that third turn at 2,000 meters and stays behind and continues to fall further and further behind each turn. And then whatever happened there on the last turn was just a huge time loss for him. And he actually did start to gain his speed back to match pace there at the very end, but a little too late. He clearly lost too much in the bottom, that back third there, or really back half there. But you can tell in his throttling he's really early. On those 3 turns there in the middle. Braking was early on all those turns there after the midpoint. DRS was a little late there in the middle. Looks like nobody got DRS at the end there. But then you look at the circuit map, and I think this is probably the best representation of my findings. You see he actually won almost every straight. I mean, there's a straight there on the top right that I guess Max kind of beat him on. He did seem to catch him there, well, in a little section of it, but most of these straights, Lewis wins. He just loses on the turns, and for him to lose at 7.5 seconds in this lap, and I mean, it looks pretty even, or even maybe a majority Mercedes as far as speed goes. He must have lost a lot of turn time. So, as a result, my conclusion would be that Mercedes needs to invest in their turning ability. That can be done by put enhancements in the floor of the vehicle. The front wing helps with that. You can see kind of this graph that I have referenced on the next page here shows kind of where their drag and downforce comes from. You get a lot of trade-off with these, and any enhancement that you make on your downforce is going to affect your drag, and your drag will make your overall speed faster, but your downforce will make your turn speeds faster. So there are trade-offs, and that's another great point where this project could really branch off into a very interesting analysis for further research on how much is too much, how much should they invest in fixing these problems, and that would be some exciting and interesting work, which you can read about some in my report. But yeah, that is what I found for this. Thank you for listening to my project. I hope you enjoy reading the report. These are some references. Thank you.